Jack Dorsey was another participant at the conference, and he had all kinds of great things that he was talking about. And we should be clear that Jack is kind of, in my opinion, the epitome of a Bitcoiner, right? He very much understands the ethos, he understands the internet, and he understands the potential impact of Bitcoin. He has openly said numerous times that if he wasn't running Twitter and Square, he would be focusing 100% of his time on Bitcoin. It seems like more and more he's spending time on Bitcoin. And one of the things he said was that the irreverence of Bitcoin is what initially drew it to him. And what he was specifically talking about was this idea of a native currency, or a currency native to the internet. And rather than have nation state currencies or currencies that are determined by geography, why don't we actually just have something that is that native currency, or the reserve asset of the internet? And to me, he has a very articulate way of talking about this. But when Elon Musk describes, if you hate if you don't like corporations, you should hate governments, Jack Dorsey talking about the irreverence of Bitcoin is basically the same thing, right? They're all saying if there is centralized authoritarian, regardless of where you are on that spectrum, type governance over you, and they have control of the monetary supply, and they have control over the monetary policy, then you do not have true freedom. And so that irreverence of a decentralized asset ends up being super attractive to them.
Yeah, I think if you're a philanthropist, you should love Bitcoin. I love that saying. And it's so true about freedom, financial freedom especially, and the access that it gives people around the world.
All right, so the next thing that Jack went on to talk about, and this was probably the best thing that I've heard Jack Dorsey say about Bitcoin. I've heard a lot of what he said. I generally think that he is one of the people who really understands everything from the technical component to the socioeconomic impact. But he specifically said, my hope is that Bitcoin creates world peace. That's it. That's his hope, right? And when you hear that from somebody who has billions of dollars of net worth, who has actively worked to give away quite a bit of money, and is spending their time on a day-to-day basis as the CEO of one of the largest social media companies in the world and one of the largest fintech companies in the world, but says that my hope about this asset that he has no control over, that he has no say, that is outsized compared to anybody else, that it brings world peace. He actually understands Bitcoin better than almost anyone else because he realizes what drives conflict, right? What drives kind of wealth inequality is the fiat system where there is a devaluation of the currency that leads to a need for consumption that prevents the ability for people to simply save in that asset and to kind of chase or pursue a life of wealth, freedom, and some level of security. And so to hear Jack Dorsey say, my hope is that Bitcoin creates world peace, that is like the greatest stamp of validation I think that an asset like this could have in the eyes of the institutional world. Remember who the audience was targeted at. So if you're sitting there listening to this isn't some like Bitcoin Luddite on the internet. This isn't some anonymous account where that you can kind of ignore. This isn't kind of a pleb that you're like, oh, they're just, nuts and or whatever. Instead, you're talking about a multi-billionaire who is one of the best entrepreneurs of our lifetime. Talk about this asset and the potential to create world peace. He's not on the Miss America stage, like the Miss America pageant where like that's what everyone's answer is. It's become cliche and they've got their, coaching or whatever. This is him sitting there talking about this in a super kind of transparent, authentic way that makes you believe he believes this, whether he actually does or not. That's my takeaway, was that he actually believes this and he's being authentic here.
Yeah, and I think it's important because often we always think about kind of it as a currency and the store of value and all the things that go along with that. But he zoomed out for a second, right? And he was like, look, this is going to help world peace, which I think was really cool and interesting to hear.
He's also been very clear about the impact it'll have in places like Nigeria, Ghana.
Yeah, he used an example yesterday, didn't he?
He did.
I forget the two countries he said, but...
Nigeria and Ghana are two countries that he mentioned multiple times. One of the things that I think people forget is pre-pandemic, Jack actually said he was going to move to Africa. People forget that he said that. Obviously, the pandemic kind of prevented that, but I think he even might have said in 2020 his goal was to spend at least half the year in Africa, right? So
do we know why
various
that is?
countries. Well, one of the things, and we talked about it in a previous episode, is Nigeria, for example. If you look at the demographics of that country, they will have more people in the country of Nigeria than in the United States by 2050. It's a very young population. There's really good internet penetration today, smartphone penetration. And they happen to have a kind of young demographic that's growing up on the internet. So all of these digital technologies are very kind of easy to adopt, right? People are really understand that. And the legacy infrastructure isn't so good so that you kind of sort of it works, right? If you think of here in the United States, if I want to go to the ATM and pull out money, it kind of sort of works, right? Now, maybe I can't pull out as much as I want every time, or I've got some limits, or I need to have a physical card. If I don't have my card, then I can't get, like, you know, there's some obstacles. But for the most part, if you want to get your money out of the ATM, you can do that. If you want to go to the bank, you can do that. There's not a lot of corruption that goes on at the actual bank. Like, you don't have to worry about the teller taking money from you. You don't have to worry about all of a sudden your money disappearing from your account. You don't have to worry about many complexities other than maybe hours of operations. Maybe there's a long line. You know, maybe the home banker isn't there to talk to you about your mortgage or whatever. So again, not perfect, but pretty good. Same thing when you start thinking about sending money, right? Wires suck. They charge you for them. Maybe they take a day or two. ACHs, maybe you've got to spend a little bit more time to do something. But for the most part, it works. In Nigeria, it's like 80+% of the country is unbanked, right? In terms of kind of traditional bank accounts like we would think about. So they are much more focused on mobile payments, mobile banking, and just come at this at a position that is much closer to what the ultimate dream of Bitcoin is than, let's say, somebody in the United States where the banking system's infrastructure is pretty good.
Well, could you imagine Jack and Elon teaming up for like a Bitcoin initiative? I think that Elon's like engineering mind, Jack's way with the internet and how it all works and marketing, I think it would be unstoppable.
Well, I mean, that's what Jack is talking about doing, right? With kind of his decentralized finance applications, kind of, we talked about that open permissionless platform that they want to build around Bitcoin, really hand tools to developers. I think that's one thing that people forget is these folks who have built these very large kind of multinational, multi-billion-dollar companies, they understand from a pure business structure standpoint. So Jack's not saying, hey, I'm going to go hire 3 people and we're going to build this stuff. Instead, what he says is, I'm going to build a team of really smart people. We're going to build tools, and then we're going to hand the tools to everybody else in an open source manner. We do it in a full transparent sense. And anyone in the world can use the tools that we create in order to build whatever they think is the best thing to build. And so that is the way that you make true societal change. It's not in a kind of centralized, closed network way. It's done in a very open network way, in an open source model. You hand tools to anyone in the world and then allow them to go. Because that means that somebody here in the United States who's 35 years old, went to Stanford, worked at a tech company, sold their startup, and now is rich, they can use the tools. But also the 14-year-old kid who just learned to code in Nigeria, right, who has to walk to the internet cafe to actually get internet access, can use the same tools. And it's who ends up creating the solution? Well, the perspective of that 14-year-old kid in Nigeria at the internet cafe actually may be more important to create solutions for majority of the world's population than that 35-year-old here at Stanford, Stanford graduate who did whatever in the tech industry. But we need both. And so the beauty is if you just create the tools, open source them, and then hand them out to everyone, I think that you will be surprised to the upside as to the innovation and the productivity that can be created because you're literally just benefiting from what the internet brings as an open system.
And what did you think about kind of the back and forth between Elon and Jack of trying to get Jack to accept advertising payments in Bitcoin?
I think that Jack really understands the idea of what Bitcoin is going to become. And I think, my personal opinion, I don't think that Jack likes the responsibility of running a social network where those types of decisions have to be made, right? Things like censorship, he's openly said, he's like, they didn't ask to be in this position. They created a platform. That platform ended up being very successful, but that's why they're working on Blue Sky. Could they create a decentralized version where basically maybe you get to decide what you see and what you don't see? Let's offload our responsibility to you and give you the power, right? Kind of having that centralized control. I think that he really has had this breakthrough of like, he doesn't want the centralized control. He doesn't want to be that person. In the meantime, in the short term, he has to be. And so he's the CEO of the business, but I think they also have processes in place. There was a Joe Rogan episode I think some of us have listened to where he brought on the woman who's in charge of like making a lot of those decisions around like trust and safety, et cetera. And they also brought on Tim Pool. And so it was Joe, Tim, Jack, and then I forget the woman's name. And they had a discussion. And to me, what I took away from the conversation was like, it's way more complex than anyone on the internet realizes, right? Because you start getting into things like there's free speech and then there's misinformation. There's doing a suspension of somebody for 12 hours, then there's taking somebody off, right? Also, I don't know what the answers are. And I think that Jack was like pretty clear in. He's like, we don't know what the answers are. We're doing the absolute best we can. We try our best to tell what the rules are, et cetera. I think the same thing now in money as well, where they're basically saying, look, we don't want to be that kind of rent-sinking middleman. We don't want to be that centralized kind of failure point. Instead, let's just open source everything. Let's hand it all out. And I think when you start looking at the advertiser stuff, it wouldn't surprise me at some point if they said that they're going to actually go ahead and accept it. But I don't think that he was kind of prepared to, break news for his public company on this.
Yeah, he was clearly trying to avoid it a little bit, but he was approaching it on a broader space. But one of the things that was interesting to me was the ESG component, right? Of them kind of using that. And in some way, it's become a buzzword of sorts of kind of investors. And
hold on, we're going to get to ESG in 1 second. But before we do that, I want to talk about Jack one more thing, because Kathy was the one who did the ESG. Is that all right?
Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because I need your guys' feedback here. Ready?
Let's go.
Jack Dorsey showed up in the shirt on the right, which is his tie-dye shirt. Jack Dorsey in the past has also wore a suit.
Talking to Congress.
No tie.
No tie, and a beard, but still got the suit on, blazer or whatever. I like Jack Dorsey tie-dye shirt and wild beard. That to me is free Jack.
He looks a little happier on the right.
I think he's also not being grilled by Congress or the Senate.
People are clapping him on.
He's standing in front of Bitcoiners and
he's like, this is great.
If there's ever two pictures of Jack on the right is in a room full of people that he agrees with from a philosophical standpoint, and on the left, probably a room of people that he doesn't agree with philosophically. But the outfit that he wore yesterday of the tie-dye shirt, just like I think Zuck wears, a gray t-shirt every day. I think Jack should go with the tie-dye shirt everywhere he goes. Like if we saw every single picture you see of him on the internet, every time you see him in person, whatever, he's wearing a tie-dye shirt.
That becomes his uniform?
I mean, legend. That would be legendary. And you're right, he just does look happier.
Yeah, you could tell that's like he's much more comfortable. I mean, part of it's obviously Congress, but I think that's just him, right?
I respect people who just do the things that make them happy. Also, I saw somebody yesterday was like, "Oh, Kathy Wood is in." Can we go back to the picture of the four of them at the grid where they were like, "Oh, Steve Lee's like in a normal room." They said Kathy Wood. I forget who tweeted this. Kathy Wood is in a Zoom room, like it's kind of set up like you would in a Zoom room.
Yep.
Elon's in his library, and then they were like, Jackson at greenhouse? I don't know where he is. I actually, it wouldn't surprise me. He may be in Africa somewhere. He may be in one of the African countries, right? Or he could be in his backyard. I don't know where he was, but it just to me, like this actually is a pretty interesting breakdown. If you look at the back, what was it? Room Raiders, right? Where they like rate the rooms on
Is that an MTV show?
That's an MTV
no,
show.
no, Raider. You're talking about the MTV show Raiders. I think there's a Twitter account where they rate the rooms or rate the backgrounds when you're on Zoom.
Yeah, what are we giving them right now? So Kathy gets an A. Right?
Kathy gets an A for professionalism and
you got to break it down by category.
Zoom etiquette. Elon, I mean, he gets an A just for being a boss. And Jack, honestly, gets an A for just not giving a shit and being happy. Like, I give him all 3 A's. Steve wins, though. Steve is just like, hey, I don't know how I got roped into doing this.